Hey y'all! Welcome to this workshop. I am super excited to share one of my favorite ways to use my Lēvo machine in my herbal practice, which is to make infused honeys. I am Salima Harleston-Lust. I am your host today, your teacher today. Thank you for sharing space with me. Feel free to pop in the chat where you're located, where you're chiming in from. I love to keep an interactive workshop. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, in our herb school. So I'm a clinical herbalist, medical astrologer, spiritual teacher. I've been in herbal medicine since 2011 and really came into this work because of my own health challenges that weren't being satisfactorily taken care of by our modern medical system. I had chronic digestive issues since childhood, hot flashes. I was in my 20s, musculoskeletal pain that I was going to the chiropractor for 3 times a week for years. And the solutions were just posed that you're just going to keep going through these serums and these prescriptions and chiropractic care, which I'm not against, but that can't be posed as the only solution. So it was really my wife who inspired. She felt inspired to say, you know what, let's just go natural. Let's do everything that we can do to use our, learn about herbal medicine, learn about holistic practices, and turn our health around. And that's exactly what we did. And once I dove into plants, I really just never stopped, and it has become the work that I do and that I love to share. And so I'm really excited to share this space with you. I teach classes. Hey Kelly, I teach classes, I teach programs. I do lots of content on all the social platforms so you can follow along. And I also have an upcoming masterclass on November 19th if you'd like to learn more about my journey, how you can really construct herbal medicine to be the center of your healthcare system. It's really how I use it. Then register for my upcoming masterclass. It's free on November 16th, I believe, or the 19th. You'll see it. I'm sure Lēvo will pop in a link in the chat for me, which I appreciate. And let's get started on making these infused oils. Not infused oils, these infused honeys. So I have the Lēvo Luxe machine, and I love it. Again, pop in the chat where you're chiming in from. Hey, Baltimore's in the building. Hi, Jordan. Hi, Florida's in the building. I love making infused honeys inside of the Lēvo machine. This is probably one of the ways in which I use it the most. And what I love about it is that it keeps the temperature stable, which is really important when it comes to honey because we don't want to degrade those enzymes and those antimicrobial benefits and proteins that we get in honey. And I've found that doing infused honeys stovetop, the temperature gets too high. You have to stick to the stove, you have to keep stirring, and the Lēvo machine really does a really great job at taking care of that. And so we're gonna make one of my favorite combinations, which is Thai basil, yummy, and jalapenos. So I'm a savory kind of person. I like the heat. I love putting cayenne pepper in my coffee, peppers in every single dish. Red pepper goes on every dish from eggs to whatever I'm eating at dinner. I'll even sprinkle it on toast. So I love to bring the heat. And so this is one of my favorite combinations. It's the Thai basil and the jalapenos. And when I brought this to a family gathering, it was the hit. It really was. Out of all of the things that were available at that dinner, the infused honey was the hit. So I hope that you all feel inspired. I'll share some other combinations that you can do with your Lēvo machine and infused honeys, and I'll also share how we can infuse hemp, and then I'll show you some pairings on a charcuterie board. We are entering the holiday season. We're entering the holiday season, so I'm sure there'll be lots of entertaining that you're doing with your loved ones, or your family, your community, your friends, and a charcuterie board. Infused honey is a perfect way to expose people to new flavors and new combinations and just new ways to share and gather around the table and be in community with one another. So the first thing that I'm going to do is put on gloves because I have enough experience to know with the peppers that I do not want to get the peppers in my eyes And a couple of things about infusing honeys, and feel free to pop questions in the chat. Like I said, I like it to be interactive, and I'm putting on my gloves and I'm gonna chop up the jalapenos first. And I do like the heat, so I will keep the seeds in some, I'll take the seeds out of some. A couple of things about infusing honeys is that the ratio, when you're infusing with fresh herbs, the ratio by volume is a 1 to 2. And so what that means is this is gonna be about a half a cup of plant material, fresh plant material, to 2 parts. So a cup would be a little bit more, maybe, of the honey. You can do it needs to be at least a 1 to 2. You can do it weaker. You can do a 1 to 3. You can do a 1 to 4. We'll see how much this comes out to. These jalapenos were frozen, and so you can see some of that moisture coming out. The thing about having a lower ratio, like a 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, by volume, is that anytime we're preparing herbal medicine preparations with fresh plants, we have to account for the water content. And just like our bodies are made up of 60 to 70% water, plants can sometimes have 70 to, can have lower amounts too, our resinous plants, but like 70 to 90% water content. And so when we are making infusions with fresh plants, we want to make sure that we have enough preservation in our solvent. And honey is already a great preservative solvent in and of itself. It has a lot of antimicrobial compounds inside of it that make it shelf stable. But once we add water, then that volume of those antimicrobial compounds, it gets diluted because we're adding water content. And so you don't want to do so far as like a 1-to-1. I have done that. That's a mistake that I made, doing a 1-to-1, like 1 cup of honey, 1 cup of fresh herbs. That will create an environment in which there's just not enough preservation qualities within the honey to keep it stable. Kept it in the refrigerator, it was still fine. But if you do a 1 to 2, 1 part herb, 2 parts honey, 1 part herb, 3 parts honey, or 1 part herb, 4 parts honey, then you know that you're staying in the realm of this remaining shelf stable. And I also share some tips on how you can use the plant material after you infuse your honey too. So the ingredients that we're using today, we have Thai basil in the basil family, has very similar benefits to many of the other basils. In that it offers digestive support. So anytime we have our aromatic plants, your aromatic plants because they're largely your spices. So the rosemaries, the oregano, the thyme, the basils, a lot of those terpenes or aromatics or volatile oils that make them so fragrant. We get a lot of our essential oils from our favorite plants too. Those have some antimicrobial benefits. And they have some digestive support benefits. So this has a nice sweetness to it, which I like. I'm chopping it up. I do want it to have smaller pieces. When we increase the surface area, basically making smaller plant pieces, that helps to make a better extraction because now we have more of the plant being exposed to the solvent, or in this case, honey. So I am going to chop this up somewhat finely. It also helps to break up the cell walls of the plant. This is another consideration when we're thinking about doing fresh plant extractions. The difference between, like if I had dried basil and you add dried basil to water, when it rehydrates, those cell walls of the plant, they're going to burst and they're going to release their constituents really easily. But when you have fresh plants, it takes more time, and heat helps the cell walls to kind of disintegrate and lose their integrity, but that happens over time. So we're going to do a longer, slower, low temperature honey infusion. And What are some other notes about infused honeys that I can share? Some of my other favorite combinations are elderberry and ginger is a really good combination. Burdock root, burdock root is also known by the name of gobo root. You can often find it in Asian markets. It's used a lot in Asian cuisine. It's used here too, and it grows wild. It's a plant that helps with your liver health, which is super important. So burdock root and cayenne pepper is a really great pairing, but you don't have to do pairings too. You can also just do single herbs, like a rosemary infused oil would be delicious. Doing oregano oil, or I keep saying oil, and infused honey would be delicious. I'm gonna keep my seeds. You see me cutting these up. I'm gonna keep my seeds because it was frozen. There's so much moisture that I think it'll be harder to get the seeds out. So I'm keeping my seeds. So this is gonna be a spicier, a hotter infusion, which is fine by me. My son will probably stay away from it. It's gonna bring too much heat for him, but I'm totally fine with this, and just keep chopping it up into smaller pieces before we pack it into our Lēvo. You can also infuse honeys with dried herbs, but you're going to want to pre-moisten the herbs, let them rehydrate a little bit beforehand. Not too much water, because then we're adding a lot of water content. But if they have a nice like dampness to it, you can rehydrate them for about an hour beforehand, and you can infuse dried herbs into your honeys as well. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat. You can use common basil as well. We have someone asked why Thai basil. We are so fortunate that down the street we have the DeKalb Farmers Market that's available to us. It's an international farmers market, and you can use any type of basil. You can use holy basil, or also known as Tulsi. This is just what I chose. But you can use any basil that's available to you. All right, I think I have some nice sized particles where I'm ready to pack my pod. Let me see, where are you all chiming in from in the chat? Someone just chimed in. I'm cutting up Thai basil and jalapeno. And now I'm gonna start packing the pod. And I learned from, when we get to our temperature, I learned from a chemist that, and you may read this online, that you shouldn't heat honey above 100 degrees. And so I learned from a plant chemist, and she says we have some more wiggle room with that really the temperature that we don't want to heat honey above is 125, 130 degrees. And so that's another reason why I love the Lēvo, is because we can control the temperature. And so I'm gonna do our infusion at 115 degrees probably for 4 hours. For 4 hours. Again, we want it low heat because we don't want the antimicrobial benefits of honey to degrade. Honey has a lot of enzymes in it. We don't want those to degrade. And it'll maintain the preservation qualities of the honey. Even if you do get it above that temperature, it's okay. You just have some proteins and particles in your honey, but you will need to keep it in the refrigerator longer, and that's okay. I have had, in terms of shelf life, I have had a honey keep for over a year, not refrigerated. And then when I did the ratio too close to a 1-to-1, that one didn't last for as long. So that was I kept it in the refrigerator because I knew that I added too much moisture. So I don't want to pack it too tightly. I want a loose pack. You want a loose pack as well for your pods. because you want the honey to be able to penetrate through the mesh and into the plants to offer a superior, or just like an efficient extraction. I am gonna add a little bit more. I'm trying to get as much as I can. So I'm gonna use 2 pods. And I know Lēvo came out with a new power pod. I believe that's what it's called. Maybe they'll pop one in the mail for me. But you don't want to pack it too tightly because you want the honey to penetrate. Okay. And a nice long, several hours, 3 hours at least. But I often let my infusions go, sometimes for 6 hours or longer. And that's been okay. And the beautiful thing is that the machine shuts off and you can walk away. You can walk away. So this is ready to go inside. You know, there's a little magnetic piece. And then I already have my honey pre-measured. So I have raw local honey. And that's a consideration to think about. I don't want to spill, but where you get your honey from, try to get it local if you can. Let me make sure, is my machine on? Uh-oh. There we go. So I poured about, I'm already at the line. I poured 16 ounces of honey and I used, so let's have some in there. So I think this fit about 10 with the 2 pods. I'm gonna turn it on. Where are we? Infuse. I'm gonna do 115 degrees I'm gonna do for 4 hours. And another thing that you can do is if you want a stronger infusion, when you take these pods out, especially if you have more herb material, you can repack them with another set of herbs. 4 hours, 115, go. You can repack them with fresh herbs and then do it again. So you can have a stronger infusion. And then in thinking about pairing, this is how, oh, I forgot my stirrer. Let's put that in there. Now I'm gonna get all sticky, but that's okay. Boom, and then I'll remove these gloves. Okay, start over. There we go. And thinking about pairings, I'll show you the charcuterie board. So Lēvo has this new program, Host and Earn, which is awesome. So people who have a Lēvo machine, you can apply to be a part of this program and host your own Lēvo parties. Y'all remember Tupperware parties? And what a great way to entertain your guests and to show off your Lēvo creations and encourage other people to get a Lēvo machine. So I put together this charcuterie board, and we have fresh homemade sourdough bread, we have carrots and cherry tomatoes and grapes and smoked meats and nuts and two types of cheeses. We have some dates, and one of my favorite cheeses is called Midnight Moon. It's a goat cheese. It's delicious. If you have Midnight Moon in your market, please get it. It is delicious, and it has this nice pungency to it. So we have this sweetness with the infused honey, and of course I add a little heat to mine, but having some pungency in the cheese will really help with complementing the flavors. So a goat cheese is really nice. A sharp cheese is also really nice. And then we also have a soft cheese over here that's a blueberry. It's like a blueberry infused goat cheese, and some homemade hummus. You can really get creative with your own charcuterie board. And then this is a honey that I made last year. So this honey is delicious. This is turmeric, burdock root, ginger, and I have the jar. Let me check. And jalapeno to bring the heat. But this is another infused honey, and it lasts a long time when you do it with the right ratio and you don't add too much moisture. It can last a very long time. And what you can do with your plant material after you've done your infusions, there's a dual purpose. You can actually take the plant material, put it in a glass jar, so another glass jar, and tincture it. So you can make an alcohol tincture. And the alcohol tincture of that plant material that's just been infused in the honey, now that alcohol is going to extract a different set of constituents from those herbs. So you do get to use those herbs again. And then now if you have the infused honey and you have the tincture, you can use about 50% vodka for the tincture. That's enough to keep it shelf stable. You don't have to get fancy. But now you have this combination where you can make an elixir. So now you can mix the honey with the tincture, and that offers more medicine. So there's lots of different ways that you can play with your infused honeys. What else do we have on our board? We have an olive and pepper blend. One of my favorite things to do, I like everything in one bite. So I love bowls, and I love sandwiches, and I love pasta. And so when it comes to a charcuterie board, I'm not gonna eat for you, but I will take bread, and then I'll put hummus, and then I'll put cheese, and then I'll put the smoked meat, and then I'll drizzle the honey and take a big bite. And that is divine. It really, really is divine. So I hope this inspires you for your holiday entertaining and your future gatherings. We've even had charcuterie boards on vacation where you make a big charcuterie board and it can feed you for days, just especially people who like to graze, and you just come and get your little snack and you graze, go watch TV, vacation, enjoy the day, enjoy the company, and yes, have fun. Now, you can also infuse cannabis or hemp into your infused honeys, but I would do it differently. I would do it where we know that with hemp and with cannabis, that because of the endocannabinoids, those are largely oil soluble constituents, and so we want to maximize that. So instead of starting with a honey infusion, I would actually start with an infused oil infusion with your hemp, and then you can use a binder, like we have some lecithin here. So once your infused oil is complete, then we have a binder, and you can combine your infused oil with the honey. If you do it, you can do it the other way around. You can start with the infused honey with the hemp or with the cannabis, but just know that you're not maximizing the extraction because it's the polarity, or like what those constituents are solvent in, what they're happy in. So I would start with the oil and then combine it with your honey. And you can also combine it, here we go. You can combine it with an infused oil. So you have the hemp infused or an infused honey. You can combine your oil infused hemp into your other herb infused honey, and that will be really, really delicious too. Are there any questions that you all have? Hoping that you feel inspired to make your own honeys. And let's look through the chat to see if there's anything. How fun. Hi, Sandra. How fun taking what's left and turning it into a tincture. What about measuring? Oh, that's a great question. So what you will do is, based on the volume of mark or plant material that you have, you will you will put it in a glass jar. So put it in a glass jar that has a lid, and you'll see what volume does that fill in the jar. And you want a 1-to-2 ratio. So use a small jar. It depends on how much plant material you have. So basically, if your jar fills up halfway with plant material, it's great. Fill it up with your 50% vodka, if that makes sense. I know, what am I doing with this board? This is perfect. We actually have a family gathering today. So I'm gonna repack everything up and then put it back together at our family gathering. And will we have recipes and instructions? We can absolutely write up recipes and instructions for y'all. I think that Lēvo is gonna send that to you all after the workshop in a follow-up communication. But it's just remembering that with your honey, and the ratio is a 1-to-2 by volume. So while I didn't use measuring cups because I kind of eyeball it, but if you're using 1 cup of herb loosely packed by volume, then you're going to use 2 cups of honey. And that will make sure that there isn't too much water content being added to the honey so that the honey begins to spoil. You can keep it out. You can also, like out in your pantry in a cool, dark place. You can also keep it in the refrigerator. But that 1-to-2 ratio is a really great base to start. And then Kelly says, would you use a different length of time and or temperature for medicinal use versus culinary? No, I would keep it the same. And I typically go longer. So 4 hours is good because we're thinking about with fresh plants, because those cell walls aren't bursting open like they do with dried plants when you add like hot water and make a tea. We need that heat and we need time to help disintegrate the cell walls of the plants so that the constituents get released into the honey. And so that happens with time. I think 3 hours is the minimum for an infused honey, but you can go longer as long as the temperature is staying stable. What binder did you use for the honey infused hemp? You can use sunflower lecithin. That's what we would use. I haven't done that. I just make an infused oil with hemp and then add it to any recipes that call for oil. I will use the infused oil for that. But I know that just with the chemistry of it, you would use a binder that emulsifies and helps capture those you can combine those oil-soluble constituents with those water-soluble constituents and make them like each other. And so sunflower lecithin will do that. And then you can probably, it depends on the volume, but maybe, and Lēvo may know this, maybe if you've made 2 cups, that's a lot to combine. If you're gonna combine, let's say 4 tablespoons of infused hemp oil into a cup of infused honey, maybe you can start with 1 teaspoon of the lecithin and then use a blender to combine them and see how that works. So you can also, because if you start with low, like 1 teaspoon, you can also increase it if you need to. Yes, Lēvo support in the chat. Thank you. A general rule of thumb is to add lecithin to a recipe, 1 teaspoon to a cup of liquid in the recipe. There you go. Boom. Can you add some of the leftover herbs with the honey in a jar? Does it affect the shelf life? Can you add some of the leftover herbs with the honey in a jar? I'm not sure I understand your question. Are you thinking that you want to keep after the infusion is done, that you want to keep everything in a jar? Like you want to keep the herbs in the jar and you also want to keep the honey in a jar and not discard or reuse the herbs? Let me know in the chat if that is what you mean by your question, Sandra. I'm happy to answer it. Yes, so check out Lēvo's Host and Earn program. for being able to, it's like your own, having your own Lēvo parties. I think that the best way to demonstrate how Lēvo machine works and how it supports people is to really just show, is to demonstrate it and to show it. One of the things that I love to do is that for any culinary recipe, I try to think about ways to make it more medicinal. So if it calls for an oil, then I will make an infused oil. If it calls for a sweetener, whether it's maple syrup or honey, sugar granules, you can even do that. I will try to think of ways to either use an infused honey, use an infused maple syrup, you can make your own date sugar or your own like herb spiced sugars. And then if it calls for water, that's a beautiful way to use a tea or a decoction instead. So you can always elevate the flavor and also the therapeutic benefits of anything that you cook when you think in that lens of like an oil for an infused oil, water for tea, and sweeteners for an infused sweetener. And so Sandra says, yes, after the infusion, keeping some of the herbs in a jar, like for aesthetics. You can. I think that those applications look prettier than practically they are, because then all of the plant material like gets stuck in your teeth, and it's not a pleasant experience to chew, but you can. I think it looks prettier than it feels in the mouth. But that could be me with texture kind of things going on. What else? Yes, with sugar, I tried different methods and it's time consuming and messy. I love a better, stronger process. Yes. So what else, you all? I'm trying to think, what other tips can I share with you all? Like infused honeys, they're really easy. So like this is probably one of the easiest preparations to make when it comes to herbal preparations. And like I said, you can go to your local farmer's market, you can go to the grocery store, and you can play. Like I feel like honey has such amazing benefits in and of itself, and when you infuse anything into honey, it's hard to make something nasty. So really give yourselves like the freedom to play with an infused honey preparation and to see what are some of those flavor combinations that you like, different cheeses, different meats, different breads. Yeah, you can have a lot of fun with infused honeys. And it's a great application for children as well. I don't know anyone in the chat who has children, and when they are not feeling well, sometimes getting the medicine into a child when they're sick is not easy. And infused honeys make that a lot easier because it makes the medicine more palatable. And of course, lots of our plants are bitters. Lots of people avoid bitters, but it's really one of those categories of plants that we need more of because bitters help our digestive system. They help our parasympathetic nervous state. They help us with that rest and digest. Bitter plants actually help us get out of fight or flight. All of those bitter compounds inside of them are really beneficial to our liver health, to our gut health, and to our nervous system health. But they're harder to take and harder to be consistent with. So having an infused honey preparation with bitters would be really beneficial. And then when you think about different extraction, think about honey is similar. It's not exactly, but honey is similar. If you can make a tea of this plant, then honey is similar in that you can likely infuse that plant into honey and still extract some of the same range of constituents where it'll be beneficial in the same way. You'll have the same sensations and feelings from it as if you made it into a water-based extraction. Yes, I'm trying to think, what else do y'all want to know about honeys? They're a really quick preparation. I'm gonna scroll through the chat, see how you all are doing. I'm here primarily for the cannabinoid infusion. The other herbs sound amazing too. Yes. Can infused butter be used in place of infused oil when combining with honey? Ooh, that's really good. Yes, because we're gonna still use that binder, that emulsifier of the lecithin to help those constituents like each other. So you can use an infused butter instead, and then you can combine that with your infused honey afterward. I would still start with kind of like the same proportions of maybe 4 tablespoons into 1 cup of honey and start there and see how it goes. And again, layer the flavors, like do both infusions. Do the infused honey, and then with some other herbs that you really like to pair it with and experiment, and then do the infused butter or the infused oil with your hemp or with your cannabis. Yes, great question. Anyone else? Trying to think of what else I can share with you all, because we still have some more time. Some other plants that you can play with that are likely in your grocery store, you can infuse cinnamon. And again, if you're infusing with dried herbs, you just want to moisten them a little bit, pre-moisten them. Don't soak them, but pre-moisten them, and then you can add them to the honey, and that will infuse your honey. Yeah. Honeys are a really, really easy preparation. So I'm so glad that you all are here and excited. Selena says, can we use a crock pot to heat our infusion? That's a good question. The thing about a crock pot is that you don't have, it depends on your crock pot. I guess how modern your crock pot is. You don't have the temperature stability that you do have with your Lēvo. You can do it stovetop, you can do it crock pot, you can do it in an oven. You will need to stir probably every 20 to 30 minutes so that the heat doesn't rise above that 100, 125 on 130 degrees, because then the constituents within the honey begin to degrade. So you can, you just have to stay right there. You have to stay right there. You have to stir continuously, and you need you need a thermometer so that you're making sure that the temperature doesn't get too high. And if it does begin to rise too high, you'll have to remove it from heat, let it cool. So it just becomes a different level of management. That's why I really do like the Lēvo the best for infused honey preparations. How would you make a hot honey in the Lēvo Luxe? What do you mean by a hot honey? Let me clarify your question, D. And then Sandra says, when moistening the dried herbs, would spiritizing them with water better than pouring water over them? I'm thinking of, spritzing them. I'm sorry, spritzing them with water better than pouring water over them. I'm thinking of being heavy-handed. Yeah, spritz is a really great way to do that. You can spritz and stir continuously. Like, you just want a nice moist, but you don't want it to be, if you were to wring it out, you don't want that much water where if you wring it out and water's dripping. So spritzing it would be a really good idea. Honey infused with red pepper flakes or other peppers. So yeah, so that's what we did here. So we have our jalapeno, we have our, you can do red pepper flakes. You can have some habanero peppers in the back. You can do some other kind of chili peppers. The most important thing with the fresh peppers, or just with the fresh plant material, is that you want it to be 1 part herb by volume to 2 parts honey. So whatever combination of fresh plants that you like to use, as long as it's in those ratios, you can play, you can have fun. You can do different combinations of peppers. Habanero infused honey tastes really good. Make your own kind of like honey, that's what you were calling it, hot honey, like honey hot sauce. Ooh, is there another binder that you can use instead of lecithin? I'm not sure, but maybe Lēvo can answer that question in the chat, if there's another binder that we can use instead of lecithin. Kelly says, I did a lilac infused honey, just left it in the sun in the greenhouse and flipped once a day for a few weeks. It tastes amazing, it sounds amazing, but it's separated into a looser textured honey on top and a semi-solid, like a wet sugar texture at the bottom. Ooh, have you experienced that and any idea why the separation? That's really interesting. Was it fresh or dried lilac? And then do you know what your ratios were? That's interesting. I'm rereading the question. It tastes amazing. Yeah, I'm not sure. But that's a really good question. I know that this turmeric one, this is probably similar to what you're experiencing where I have this semi-solid. It's probably just the range of constituents that are coming out of the honey and maybe some precipitation. So some higher polarity constituents not liking some of the lower polarity constituents, and so they'll separate. That's a really good question, but it sounds really delicious. And then how can I infuse lime into butter? Had it in Paris and want to make it. Is it fresh lime? Is it lime zest? Is it whole? Like you want the lime juice as well? What part of the lime are we trying to infuse? Lime into butter. Lime zest would make a lot of sense, and that would be easier to infuse because that's just like our infused honey here, where 1 part to 2 parts honey, and you have the zest. But if you add too much of that liquid from the lime, I think that it's probably gonna taste delicious, but it will spoil over time. It might spoil over time. I would try both. So I would try doing some zest of lime and infusing that into the honey and seeing to what degree can you add some of the lime juice into honey and seeing how long that lasts for you. And I would also, if you had it in Paris, it could just be, you could just do that for the day and like knowing that that you don't need to preserve it. So you can always combine lime juice with the honey. They're both like water-based, so you don't need a binder for that. Since they're both like water-based, the lime juice and the honey, I think it'll combine really well. Maybe you'll need a hand mixer or a hand blender. But I think that if you wanted to stay and be preserved, I think that you'll have to play with that level of moisture because you're going to be squeezing the lime juice into that. But I would start with the zest. Sandra says, I appreciate using a frozen thawed food. My concern was the water content. Now I feel I can confidently create infused honey with the Lēvo. Yeah, so we have some fresh frozen elderberries in the freezer that we grew from our own elderberry trees, and that was the best way to keep them. I didn't want to dehydrate them, but I used frozen elderberries to infuse and make that elderberry ginger infused honey. I think I added jalapenos to that too, and it was really delicious. But yes, you can absolutely use frozen as well. And then Felicia says, to make an infused simple sugar, would you use regular sugar to start or an infused sugar? Oh, do you mean like an infused simple syrup? But I think you mean an infused simple syrup. Regular sugar to start or an infused sugar? Maybe clarify the question. Okay, so you want to make an infused simple syrup. So you want to make a simple syrup with, you just want to make a simple syrup. So our basic simple syrup recipe, I'm not sure of the exact proportions, Google can tell you, but let's say it's 1 part sugar to 2 parts water. Instead of the water, you would replace that with a tea. And that becomes your simple syrup. So let's say it's cardamom tea or basil, but you would make it a really strong decoction or a tea. It wouldn't be like your standard tea that you're gonna drink with like 1 teaspoon of herb. You would use a lot more herb material. You could probably do it, depends on the plant, you could probably do that like a 1-to-1 if you wanna make your tea. Let's say it's cardamom, we want a cardamom simple syrup. You could probably do like by volume, 1 cup cardamom, maybe 2 cups, we'll do 1 to 2. 2 cups water, make that into a strong tea, and then you strain out the cardamom seeds, and then that becomes your water content for the simple syrup. So you add the sugar to that, and now you have a cardamom simple syrup. Let me know if that makes sense. You can find the proportions on the internet. I think it's a 1-to-2, and then you can play with the strength of your tea. And that can be any combination of plants that you want. I was just using cardamom as an example. But let me know if that answers your question, if that makes sense. That's a good question. Simple syrups are delicious and another way to layer flavor, and also to layer flavor to your own medicinal teas, to layer flavor to your morning coffee using simple syrups, and then you've made them so you know that there's no other added ingredients. I think the shelf life, depending on how much sugar you use, they can last anywhere from 3 months. If you use higher amounts of sugar, then that makes it more shelf stable, and sometimes they can last indefinitely, at least up to a year. Okay, that's a great question. So Felicia says, that makes sense. What if I want to use cannabis? So you want cannabis, you want a simple syrup of cannabis. Ooh, that's good. That's good because we have to think about the chemistry and what the polarity of the constituents and like what the constituents like to be extracted in. And so we know that we want those endocannabinoids, and those are going to extract better in oil. And you want a simple syrup, which is sugar and water-based, and I think you're going to need an emulsifier. So you're still going to need the lecithin to play with getting those constituents, because oil and water don't mix. So getting those constituents to like each other, we're probably going to need the binder. So it'll be probably a little thicker. Like there's going to have texture to it on the tongue, but I think that would be the way to do it. That's fun. That's a fun experiment. I'm still thinking through it. Yeah. And if someone else in the chat knows of another way, let us know. Food grade, Felicia says, could I use a food grade vegetable glycerin as a binder instead of lecithin? Glycerin is more on the water side when we think of like dissolves like. Glycerin's still on the water side, so I don't think it's a true emulsifier in the way that lecithin is. It's going to make the ingredients like each other, make the different constituents like each other. I think that it's a temporary, like it can temporarily keep them together because it's so thick, but I think over time you're still going to see separation. Now, if it's just for one night, and like I'm going to make this cocktail or this mocktail, then I think for one night that'll work. But I think if you wanted to have them be preserved, and I think that you're still going to see some plant separation with glycerin. Lēvo says, using an infused MCT is another great carrier to then blend into the 1-to-1 to sugar for the simple syrup. Yeah, and you still need something that's going to make those, well, they have a recipe. So check out their recipe, and you're still going to need something that makes those ingredients like each other, because you can also emulsify temporary, but you can also emulsify in a blender. That agitation, that high-speed agitation will get the constituents to like each other, like collide and like each other for a little bit, maybe enough for, and it is a little bit of time, but over time, I think you're still gonna see that oil-water separation. But that's a fun experiment. Any other questions? Let me scroll through the chat. All right. I think that's all I see. How long will the honey last in the cabinet once I put it in an amber colored jar? I've had them last for a year. I've also kept them in the refrigerator so that they last longer. In this instance, I probably would not keep it in an amber colored jar because I want to be able to, I actually do want to see if there's going to be some kind of antimicrobial growth, and that'll make it difficult to see. So I would store it in a clear jar if you're going to store it in the pantry so that you can see if there is some antimicrobial growth, if mold does start to grow. But when I do that right ratio, that hasn't happened. And then also, because they're so delicious, they honestly tend to not last that long. We tend to eat them and gobble them up, make your own charcuterie board, have your own pairings, but I would actually not do, I know we do a lot of other herbal storage and herbal preparations in amber jars, but I want to see what's going on in that jar as best we can. We know the microbial growth is happening before we see it as mold, but you want to make sure, and I think that the amber jar is going to make that harder to see in terms of just being able to protect yourself from microbial growth. Yay! Kelly is unboxing her Lēvo in this moment. Which one did you get, Kelly? Which Lēvo machine did you get? And one of the reasons why the Lēvo Luxe also works really well with infused honeys because it has that dispensing for the high viscosity fluids. So I haven't played with any of the other Lēvo machines, but I love my Luxe. I love my Luxe, and I really love the ability to be able to walk away and trust that my infusion's going. And when I come back to it, it's going to be complete. And I'm going to be able to enjoy it the same day or the next day. I have also left, in full transparency, I have left infused honeys and just turn the button back on like overnight. If I'm leaving the office and I'm not ready to strain it, then I'll turn it back on. I wanted to keep infusing. I'll come back the next day and strain it later. So I really do I'm really happy with my Lēvo machine. So just to reiterate some of the pairings, you can make your own hummus. Took 15 minutes to make hummus. Chickpeas, olive oil, you can make your own tahini, fruit, nuts, smoked meats if you eat meat. Oysters and sardines actually do really well on charcuterie boards too. Dates, olives or olive mixtures if you like them, and goat cheese. You gotta go get the midnight moon. You have to get the midnight moon cheese for your infused honey. It is delicious. You will not regret it. We have carrots, we have vegetables. Super fun way to entertain. Check out, we got a stray tomato. Check more of my workout on Instagram or Facebook. I have an upcoming masterclass to learn more about herbal medicine and like how to make herbal medicine your own healthcare system. I really believe that herbal medicine fills a really important gap in healthcare today, as it always have, where we need to be able to be sovereign and self-sufficient and know how to take care of ourselves at home, and we can do that really skillfully and successfully with plant medicine. So if you come on that masterclass, you'll learn some of the ways in which I use herbal medicine in my daily life. To support myself, my family, teach my students. I have some students here who have been in this workshop. Hey, Kelly. I think Sandra too. And so that's on November 16th. It's on a Saturday, but check that out. It's free. It's a really informative workshop. And thank you, Lēvo, for this. I'm trying to think what else. can I share and let me know if there's any other questions. Infused honeys are really, really easy. Really, really easy. I really hope that you all will play with this herb preparation. This person says, I have an original Lēvo. Maybe Lēvo can answer that question in the chat. Will the honey still work in my machine? I haven't played with any of the other machines, but I think someone from Lēvo will be able to answer that question. Thank you, Denise. This is fun. This has been fun for me. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other preparations. Ooh, horseradish. Like really, you could go to your local grocery store, grab some aromatic plants, chop them up, and you can make this today. You will not regret it. There's so many different combinations. It's hard for me to think of like off the top of my head, but I think that you'll enjoy playing with this preparation. Is there a discount code being offered for the machine? There is. That is, I think you just put in Iwilla Remedy and you'll get a discount on your Lēvo machine. And then I think Lēvo has the workshop link, but it's also on our website, iwillaRemedy.com, so that you can come on to the free masterclass later this month. And let me know in the chat, who's gonna play with this preparation? Like for real. Who's gonna play with it? Who's gonna try it? And what herbs are you gonna try playing with it? Good, it's really easy. It's really easy. Like other than making a tea, this is so easy. It's easy and it's fun. I really do hope you all play with this plant preparation. It's really a way to be creative in your plant practice. It's a really accessible entry point to your plant practice. Like I said, you can, all the plants that you're thinking about taste gross, make an infused honey. And so that way you can still enjoy the medicinal benefits that you need from those plants in your own like healthcare routine. But yeah. I'm trying to think of what else to share with you all. This was fun. Yes, Virginia says I'm gonna go all out with this. I hope you do. I really, really hope you do, because it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's really a lot of fun. So any of your aromatic herbs, any of your bitter herbs, and then remember that tip of like, how do you make any dish more medicinal? Replace tea for water. Like if the recipe calls for water, use a tea. If the recipe calls for an oil, use an infused oil or an infused butter. Although butter has water, so sometimes that doesn't work in recipes, but you can always infuse your butter or your oil. And then if it calls for a sugar or a sweetener, liquid sugar, use your infused honey or an infused maple syrup, an infused glycerin, use that glycerite. You can use that instead. Thank you, Kelly. Anything else? Anything else? I hope you all have enjoyed this time. I've enjoyed it. I love sharing about plants. And then remember the other tip, after you're done with your infusion, don't throw away the plant material. Put it in a jar and cover it with alcohol, cover it with vodka. And now you have another plant preparation, and then you can combine your honey and your tincture, and that just makes some really delicious medicine. And if you do this enough times, like we have so many different infused honeys with the accompanying tinctures, now you have some cool combinations. So we have an elderberry, jalapeno, something or other tincture. I can pair it with this infused honey. That's the burdock, jalapeno, ginger, turmeric, honey. So you can have some really fun pairings just with those honeys and those tinctures too when you make a couple of them in a row at a time. And then they will be the showstopper, and you're entertaining on your charcuterie board. And they also really make nice gifts. They really make nice DIY gifts. So you don't have to do, this is a large amount, but like if you made little 4-ounce jars, like those little pepper jars of infused honeys as gifts, people will really appreciate that. They will really like that. And you can also just You don't always have to make a charcuterie board, obviously, but you can also use that infused honey. If you make tea, you can add that as your sweetener instead of plain honey or plain sugar or plain maple syrup or plain agave. So you can infuse any of those sweeteners in the same way that you would the infused honey. You can make your own simple syrup. And just think about, there's lots of different ways. You can put this in your coffee, put this as an additional medicinal layer into your herbal teas, and then into any recipes that call for a sweetener. It'll add a nice flavor. So thank you all. I'm glad you all came. Samantha says, go and unbox. Good. This was awesome. So thank you so much. Hope to see you. Let me know in IG if you've come from this workshop, and we'll connect soon. Bye.